Hey guys, Technometry here with the video for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be comparing the iPhone 11 with the iPhone 8 Plus in a head-to-head comparison where we take a look at the hardware, the software, overall performance, and build in mid 2021 to give you guys a rundown whether you're looking to buy either of these phones or looking to upgrade from the iPhone 8 Plus to the 11 and much more. Everything that you need to know, we're going to break it down for you guys. So let's talk about these two devices in 2021. These two phones, as you can see, has a lot of similarities based on some of the features that we look at just plainly. But before we discuss all of that and much more, if you guys are new to our channel, we do a lot of tech news reviews and giveaways, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, if you guys are in the market for one of these phenomenal devices at a discounted price, make sure you guys check out the link in the description section as well. So talking about the iPhone 8 Plus with the iPhone 11 isn't sort of head-to-head comparison in a lot of ways, because there on the iPhone 11 there's actually the Pro Max, which is probably the better comparison, because the 8 Plus is the bigger size. The Pro Max are the bigger version of the newer lineup. So Apple has rebranded their Plus into the word Max now for the bigger size. So if you're wondering why we're doing this comparison, it's simply because these two phones, if you look at the size, even though the Plus size and the regular 11 are pretty much in the same in a lot of ways, there's a lot of things we need to talk about to kind of get you guys to understand the differences and the similarities before you make that decision. The iPhone 8 Plus, released back in 2017, like we mentioned with the regular 8, was a phenomenal device during its time. There's a lot of neat features that come out of the iPhone 8 Plus, and the iPhone 11 year was released in 2019, 2 years later. And as you see here, just by looking at it, there has been changes as well. By looking at the body size of these two phones, both of the phones are a bigger size compared to if you're looking at the regular 8 or any of the 4.7-inch phones. They fit really nice in your palm, especially if you have somewhere between a little average size hand to maybe a bigger hand. It probably sits well. If you have smaller hand, it might feel a little bit uncomfortable. But besides that, just look at the body of itself. As you'll notice, between these two phones, both of the phones have both front and back are both glass, so you're able to do wireless charging. They do have aerospace grade aluminum body built to it, so a lot of similarity in that aspect. You'll notice things like the camera. There's dual camera, where the camera adjustment has been different, where in the 8 is Plus, as you can see here, the cameras are this way, and the 11 are up and down here. The cameras are separated and much bigger, looks like, just the lens itself, because of just design improvement. Things like Apple logo being up top, more towards mid, and the word iPhone, if you look closely, are removed from the newer version of the iPhone. So those are some of the things that we noticed in terms of the body. You'll notice the 8 Plus has that legacy or iconic home button, whatever you call it, and that top notch, where the iPhone 11 completely removed that, going all screen body to it. And let's talk about the display of the iPhone 8 Plus here. As you can see here, the display on the 8 Plus is actually a 5.5-inch display. And although the phone side by side, if you look at it, look about the same in size, because of the top notch and the home button area, you only get a 5.5 LCD Retina HD display. Compared to the iPhone 11 here, you get a 6.1 all screen. This is liquid Retina HD display, so slightly different. Liquid Retina versus regular Retina is kind of the comparison you're getting out of it. In terms of resolution, surprisingly, the iPhone 8 Plus has a much better resolution. It has a 1920 by 1080 pixel at 401, and the iPhone 11, although it has that liquid retina, it has a 1792 by 828 pixel resolution at 326 between these two phones. There's a lot of some other similarities, as both of the phones have similar contrast ratio. iPhone 8 Plus has a 1300:1, where you have 11 1400:1. Not really much of a difference. Things like true tone, wide color display, haptic touch, all of that are evident between these two phones. Even to a degree, both of the phones have same amount of max bright in it, so you're getting around 625 nit of brightness between these two phones. So there you guys have it for the display and the internal bodies of these two phones. Let's talk about the battery of these two phones, which is really important aspect when you talk about these two phones, because both of the phones does have really big battery. The iPhone 8 Plus here has a 2600 mAh compared to a 3800 mAh on the 11. And when we talk about the battery, you want to talk about the video playback. What sort of video playback do you get out of these two devices? Well, the iPhone 8 here, you get about 17 hours of video playback. That is, if you're just watching videos all day, that's how much you expect it to get. Where the iPhone 8 Plus here gets you around 14 hours of video playback. So 3-hour video playback difference between these two phones. Surprisingly, during in the other tests, like when you're on standby and duration test, the iPhone 8 Plus outlasted the 11. So that was kind of a mixed testing we received, but that's something to mention for you guys. And talking about that, let's talk about the chipset on these two phones. The chipset is really important, especially when you're doing multitasking or if you're just using it mainly for gaming. You're going to want to make sure you have a chip that is really fast, and this is where the chip difference between these two phones, because the 8 Plus was released in 2017, it has the A11 Bionic chip, where the iPhone 11 here comes with the A13 Bionic chip, because 2 years later, of course, Apple always will go ahead and improve their chip to make their phones a little bit faster than the previous generation. That's sort of the given that we see between the phones. And now let's talk about the camera of these two phones, which is a really important aspect, because when you talk about camera, it's something that you want to talk about between these two phones. And strikingly enough, both of these two phones, because they both have two 12 megapixel back camera, does a lot of the things in terms of when it comes to photography. You're able to take HD photos on both of them. You have things like portrait mode that it's available on both of these two phones, as you can see here. The one thing we see that on the iPhone 11 is this high key light mono, which on this portrait mode is not available on the 8 Plus. Of course, square, which isn't available on the 11, is available there if you really like to take it square photos. And in terms of actual video recording, surprisingly, both of the phones can actually record in 4K up to 60 frames per second. So as you see here, we have 4K 60 frames per second, same with the iPhone 11. So video recording go head to head. Other noticeable difference between the improved upgrade on the 11, you get things like night mode, which is impossible on the iPhone 8 Plus. So night mode just enhances your photography, especially when you're taking videos and photos at night. There's also something called diffusion that allows you to be able to take photos at more in-depth compared to the iPhone 8 Plus. And now let's talk about the actual software of both of these two phones. You notice between these two phones, we are able to upgrade to iOS 14, hence why we have these bigger app icons, app widgets, and all that and much more. And this is a good news for both of these two phones, is that they'll get iOS 15, which is coming out later this year. So that's a good win for both of these two phones. So in terms of software update, we expect the iPhone 8 probably going to get another 2 to 3 years of software update compared to the 11, which is going to get another 3 to 4 years of updates, because Apple generally supports their phone for a good 4 to 5 years. Both of the phones are going to be relevant this year, even next year, and the year after that. And then after that, the iPhone 8 might lose its iOS major update support, where the iPhone 11, it's going to be still running for another good, at least we suspect another 3 to 4 years, as we mentioned. So there you have it for the actual software of these two phones. Both of the phones, as you see here, are able to download all of your social media apps, all of your games. One thing we do want to mention, because of that better chip enhancement and improvement and more RAM on this iPhone 11, gaming wise, you're going to get a lot of more experience when it comes to heavy graphic games that are meant to play on the console. This is where the iPhone 8 does a really good job. Even things for watching videos, although both of the phones does have really big screen, the iPhone 8 here, 8 Plus, that 5.5 versus the 6.1, video watching on the 11, you'll find it's much more comfortable and much clearer in terms of watching videos. And you'll notice that whether watching YouTube videos or watching Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, whatever your favorite streaming app is, you'll notice that difference between these two phones. Besides that, both of the phones, as we mentioned, because they're on iOS 14, all the apps are supported. If you're not really caring about having the latest and the greatest of these two phones. Both of the phones, again, does absolutely well job and does a good job in doing your basic function for calling, texting, your browsing. You find that you can't really find any differences between these two phones. A lot of similarity in that area between these two phones, and surprisingly so, that is the case between these two phones. So let's talk about why you might get an 8 Plus in 2021. Well, there's a couple of reasons to get the 8 Plus in 2021 that we want to mention. Of course, the first thing is we saw, even with the liquid retina on the 11, the iPhone 8 Plus here does have about 23% higher pixel density because of that 401 ppi versus 326 ppi on the iPhone 11. You have much better pixel density. You also have almost close to 40% higher resolution of the actual display here, as you notice between it, because of that 1920 by 1080 compared to that 792 by 828 on the iPhone 11. So because iPhone 8 Plus here has those are things you notice. And of course, other thing to mention is that the home button, if you miss the home button, or you like to have a phone with the home button, because Apple is actually rumored to bring that home button on its newer phones that have all screen display. So maybe the next software update, who knows, might be having a virtual home button on it. But if right now, at this given moment, the iPhone 8 Plus does have that home button. The other interesting aspect we mentioned about the 8 Plus is that when you're looking specifically on battery duration and just leaving the battery on standby and such, we see that the iPhone 8 Plus actually gets 4 hours longer than the iPhone 11. So we've seen 21 hours up to just battery duration test versus 17 hours on the iPhone 11. And that's, you have it. And lastly, of course, the price. If you compare the price point between these two phones, the iPhone 8 Plus, you're probably going to be able to get it under 300, definitely around 250 plus or so in 2021, mid 2021, compared to the iPhone 11, which you're going to be paying over probably closer to 500, so almost 50% more or 50% less, which depends which way you're looking at it. So if price is a big factor for you and such, you probably are going to be looking at the 8 Plus versus the iPhone 11 here. And why might you get the iPhone 11 in 2021? Well, a couple of reasons here is that it has almost a 16% faster CPU, and that's because it has 4 gigs of internal RAM versus 3 gigs on the 8 Plus. So that's a given. It has that A13 Bionic chip versus that A11 on the iPhone 8 Plus. So you're going to get a lot of that. You also see the front-facing camera we didn't mention, but it has a 12 megapixel front-facing camera, so better selfies are going to be on the 11 versus the 8 Plus because it only has a 7 megapixel front-facing camera. And lastly, to mention that it does have a 1.71 faster download speed when you're doing downloads because of that updated chip and more internal RAM. Overall, you do also have things like night mode, just a little bit of enhancements and wide angle in the iPhone 11 photography that we see. So between these two phones, of course, both phones are great phones, even in 2021. The iPhone 8 here, we see it's probably going to last another 2 to 3 years, we suspect, versus 3 to 4 years on the 11. So if you're looking for a long-term phone with a slightly better camera, possibly, and that you like that all-screen Face ID and all those futuristic design that Apple has introduced with the iPhone 12 lineup that similarly replicates on the 11, which we see the only difference between the iPhone 11 and the iPhone 12 is probably like 5G and slight subtle improvements, which doesn't really make too much sense. So if you're upgrading from the 8 Plus to 11, it's definitely worth it to upgrade. If you're considering between these two, price budget is probably what you're looking at. Both of the phones deliver exceptionally well with a lot of features going into it. Budget-friendly phone, 8 Plus is probably what you're going to be going with. But nonetheless, they're going to be relevant phone this year, next year, and years to come for between these two devices. There you guys have it for our review of these two phones. We want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think about these devices? Have you guys upgraded from one to another, used one of these phones in the past? Leave a comment in the comment section with your experiences. Thanks for watching, guys. See you guys next time.